So, what is magic and is it real? I years ago was an atheist for many years, and my rational view at that point would have been there's absolutely no such thing, and I never would have believed in it. And there's a type of magic I certainly don't believe in today, actually, and but there's a type that I do. So I've sort of over the years sort of revised my views on things, as you do. I suppose I kind of view it that you see more evidence over your life experiences, and the more evidence you sort of come across, the more you're able to sort of assess what a situation is and sort of change what your views are. And I never really thought I would think that actually but I sort of think that there is a type of magic that's real. I would probably call it a mystery more, because the whole term of what magic is one that sort of has often got different definitions that can actually mean other things than what they say they do. The point of fact is, if you go and see a stage performer, a magician, really it's someone who performs tricks, isn't it? Very clever tricks, though, but sometimes clever, But they're not. It's not real magic, is it? It can be explained through a science. It's just that you don't always understand what the science is, as an audience member. And that's half the fun, isn't it? Trying to work it out. But the type of magic that I've sort of come to believe in more, I suppose it's more of a mystery. I would probably describe it as, and that's just sort of a mystery, a supernatural one of how life is anyway. How did the earth come to be as it is? How is the sun and the moon moving as they are? How are the stars where they are? How did things get to be as they are? The oceans, the animals, humans. Some people see, the magic in everything. You could say, in that sense. I suppose I've come to view God as the source of that. As the sorcerer, you might say. In actually, there may well be an explanation as to how the world is created, how the earth is in its position, and the stars and the sun and the moon. There may be scientists that can sort of give some explanation, but I don't think everyone knows. I don't think science has its limits. I don't think we can explain how everything is. And I think there was a great wonder to it all. There's also what Carl Jung would have called synchronism. Just incredible coincidences that you find within your life. And I found that in my life experiences as part of the evidence. Things that just seemed too coincidental for there not to be some underlying order to things. Chance encounters with people. I'll give you an example where you come across a really obscure and strange word that is really unusual, and then a stranger that could have had no knowledge of that, happens to use that same word, in the same day perhaps, or that kind of situation. Just really bizarre, surreal things like that nobody could have orchestrated, And I think that so many occasions like that have occurred, that it sort of makes me think that there must be something, there must be some sort of spiritual force beyond my understanding orchestrating such a thing. That's sort of the only kind of oddly rational conclusion I could come to in the end, actually. Just for the sheer number of incredible, extraordinary coincidences over the course of many years. Quite what that is, I choose to call it God, but it doesn't mean I understand the nature of what God is and how or quite why such things happen. It's something I'm still sort of trying to learn myself. I'm not a teacher of life. I'm a student of it, or at most, a studying teacher, perhaps, like all of us. So there's a type of magic I've sort of surprised myself, over the years coming to believe in, that I would have appalled my older self, my atheist self from years ago, who would probably look at me and think how deluded and what a fantasist I am. But then I would have said to him, you haven't seen all the evidence and experienced it over the years, and don't make such conclusions until you've looked at all the evidence in your own life. That would be my message to my older doubting self. But yeah, and I really don't know what other conclusion I could come to, really, because there's certainly no people that could have performed and orchestrated those numerous coincidences that occurred over many years. Really, just quite bizarre, but quite incredible, really. I must write down some of them. I often think I should have recorded them, because too often I then forget that things have happened, but I just have a remembrance that incredible things happened, even though I can't quite remember the exact details of them always. I wish I'd recorded and written down the actual occurrences in more detail. But anyway, coming on to the other part of the discussion, there's a type of magic that I don't believe in as well, actually. And that is to say that magic that is allegedly performed by other people. But there are so many films today, books, as there always were, that seem to suggest, in a science fiction way that people can do magic. But I've never seen any evidence of that in my life experiences yet. I've seen many things that people have done, certainly, that I couldn't always explain. That happens. That's fairly commonplace, actually. But there are incredible things that people do. And I don't want to make light of that, because that is incredible. There are incredible acts of endurance. I've just been watching a documentary about a man falsely accused and imprisoned for 30 years and behaved incredibly dignified and humble and had an incredibly enduring spirit, and wasn't bitter and angry. And that itself to me is quite a wondrous thing. There are people that risk their lives, put themselves in trouble to go and help other people. People that devote themselves through years and decades even to public service, to helping other people, giving their time and energy and money even. And those are wondrous things, aren't they? There are incredible feats that people do that are incredible. And acts of endurance, for example, whether they're psychological or physical in nature, and those things are wondrous. Somebody that overcomes an addiction, perhaps, that has been really difficult for them. Somebody that's able to have the strength of character to endure something that's been a real hardship, and perhaps without sufficient support. Examples like that, certainly do provide cases where, people do often impress us all, just what can be achieved, with the right level of dedication and devotion. We often are able to do incredible things, both good and bad, actually, especially in particular circumstances, under enough stress and that. I know I've gone through all sorts of things I never would have imagined I would ever have done. Things that I just because of circumstances, I suppose, sometimes when you have to. But all those things, as impressive and wondrous that they can be, and they are, they still are things that can be explained and understood in rational terms. You can understand how it's possible, at least. It's feasible. You can sort of relate to it. It's something that requires an incredible amount of devotion, perhaps some sort of self-sacrificing, perhaps an extraordinary amount of energy given to something. But it is still understandable. It's something that can be rationalized. We can sort of look at it through a scientific lens, and we can sort of understand the phenomenon, through a psychological perspective, perhaps, or physical, biological perspective. It can be explained through science and its modern understandings. But this idea of people having superpowers, beyond the capacity of science to understand, that I have never witnessed, and I've never seen any credible account of that. I suppose I should remain agnostic, because that would be the more scientific kind of understanding, wouldn't it? I lecture people enough on that. If you don't know absolutely on something, if you don't have proof for or against something, you might keep an open mind to it. So I know some people, that's a good argument for being agnostic about God until you have evidence for or against it, as well as other supernatural phenomenon. I know people would counter that by saying, as atheists do, what about the spaghetti flying monster, for example, or absolutely ridiculous things like that. You could be entertaining all sorts of ridiculous thoughts, Well, yes, I would. I would keep an open mind to all sorts of things, however surreal and ridiculous they might appear. How about fluorescent glowing jelly monsters that float through the ocean? Who would believe that if you didn't see the evidence? Or the other countless wonders of creation, I wouldn't believe a lot of things, and not just the wonders at the bottom of the ocean. There's a lot of odd, strange spectacles, I perhaps would struggle to believe if I didn't see the evidence, and so yes, I would keep an open mind to anything, quite frankly. Why not, It doesn't mean that I would believe it in any way, and I don't sort of have to spend hours thinking about it even, unless there's some credible reason. If large numbers of people perhaps are saying that they believe it, that might be a good reason to sort of look into it, at least, if only to sort of find out, why they think that. Is there anything credible to sort of to explain why they think that? It doesn't mean I'm going to accept it in any way, though. But, it might mean I want to investigate it, to see why they think that. Because also, if large numbers of people think something, I might well be influenced by it as well. Because those people are going to be producing different media, they're going to be out there, I'll meet them, and I'd rather sort of be aware of what their beliefs are and how credible it is and what evidence there might or might not be. I'd rather sort of investigate something and sort of know if it's possible to. But, if I don't find conclusive evidence to prove it or not, I might remain agnostic. And I don't find that at all sort of worrying to sort of entertain a whole wealth, of many possibly surreal and bizarre and seemingly ridiculous things. Because so many things would be, who would believe that there were such things as nucleus or atoms, or minuscule leptons and quarks, I think they're called, under a powerful microscope that have been proven now. Would you believe that if you didn't see the technology and someone just told you that? You might not. You might think it was fantasy, huh? So I might just keep an open mind to it. It doesn't mean I'm going to accept it, but I'm not going to reject it either. I'm just going to look at potential evidence for or against it. And there's nothing wrong with remaining agnostic about something. To me, that seems quite a credible scientific perspective, actually. About many things. What are supernatural things? There wasn't so long ago that microscopic germs, in fact, would have lacked any credible evidence, before the age of modern science and its use of modern technology, of things like microscopes or even telescopes, dare I say, in the field of astrology. So, science and its technology has allowed us to prove some things that would have appeared quite wondrous and ridiculous in earlier ages. Was it Arthur C. Clarke, someone like that, who said, modern things, I'm paraphrasing, but modern things would appear magical to an ancient people. I think it was modern technology. Modern science, I think, would appear magical to an ancient people. If you took an ancient people from years ago and just transported them into the future, they might think it was completely utterly, a different world. They might not recognize the Earth. They might see it as magical, aeroplanes flying, wow, it's Pegasus, a horse with wings, um, chariots of fire, wow. We're so used to seeing cars and gadgets and computers, oh, it's a library that I fit inside my pocket. But if you described that to someone from just a few decades ago, never mind centuries and millenniums ago, wow, how amazing, how possibly even magical that could appear to you. But so that could also be true for future, as yet unknown inventions. We don't really know. And you look at the speed at which, science can, evolve and create ever new technologies. Who knows what in months or years to come. There could be inventions out there we're still not aware of, or we don't know what the potential uses are for. You look in the ancient world, the idea of the all-seeing eye, the idea that there could be a being that could see in all places at all times, how ridiculous that would appear to many people. The idea of believing in something like that, to many, would be utterly ridiculous. It might even still be like that to some. But, now we have got CCTV and cameras, and, we're quite aware through technology, it is possible to observe someone in a different place and time than yourself. It's possible to observe many people in different places. It's quite possible, isn't it, through that technological thing? And that's just where we are in technology today. That's, not taking account of where it could be in years, decades, or, dare I say, centuries or millenniums into the possible future. Is it quite possible that, there could be some sort of extraterrestrial technology that already exists on other planets, and that there could be aliens watching us now, or dare I say, supernatural beings? I'm not going to say there are, but I'm not going to say, based on the technological evolution over the centuries and millenniums, that it's impossible. I don't know is the honest answer to that. I certainly don't. Is it possible? Yes, it seems to me. Anything could be, really. So I could be agnostic about that. But, so it's not a great stretch of the imagination to think it's possible that there could be an all-seeing eye or something that could potentially see us in different places and times, quite possibly. Something that has, abilities beyond the human possibilities. We're limited in our capacities. We've got different capacities that animals haven't, and sometimes they have capabilities that we don't. There's that's the interesting field, isn't it, of studying biologies and that. That's fascinating. You study different creatures. Some of them are able to see behind themselves. They've got sort of surround sound vision and all this. They can do. They're just incredible wealth of different kind of abilities that they have. Chameleons, for example, that can change colour according to their environment. Species that can change their gender. Others that can impregnate themselves, or that can entirely replicate their genetic being so that they can potentially keep living for as long as they can until they're killed. There are sort of like incredible different species within creation that already exhibit, phenomenon that are, beyond what people can do. And so I don't find it that incredible or unbelievable that there could be a supernatural being that could have abilities beyond our own understanding. We're still discovering different species with varying sort of different abilities now. In fact, who's to say what other things there are in terms of different species and in technologies too that could evolve. So there are sort of a great many other mysteries, aren't there, that we don't understand, and our scientific understanding is constantly evolving, isn't it? We must never think that where science is and what its capabilities are the end product and the end goal of where we are. It's always evolving and changing. It always has in the past. Why shouldn't it now? And recognizing or trying to recognize what those limits are, is a vital part within any field of study. I am agnostic, I suppose, about whether people are able to perform acts of magic and that. I certainly see a plethora of different representations of people doing supernatural powers beyond the ordinary abilities that we have. Okay. And they're very popular today. Harry Potter, of course, is a really influential and popular franchise, but there's a lot of others besides. There's the X-Men and all the other superhero figures. It's a really popular genre, science fiction, isn't it? But as far as I know, it is fiction. I haven't seen the factual evidence to confirm that. But as I say, I will keep an open mind to that. But I'm wary of accepting anything without some sort of evidence. And I suppose, I would think it's possible that there are people that want to project that there are more capabilities that people have, because it might then give people that impression that there are some people with supernatural powers beyond the ability of all the rest of us, that are to be feared, and we're to be in awe of them more than any others. And I haven't really seen any credible evidence to sort of justify that, really. And I sort of think everyone I've met are quite capable of doing extraordinary feats, but they are within certain bounds, certain parameters, and even then, we all still have some limitations, we all still are mortal. We still all live within our body. We still all have a certain number of hours within a day. We're prone to illnesses. We have certain limitations, however much we are able to sort of push those to a certain extent, there are still limitations we can't go beyond. And I haven't yet seen any good evidence. So I'm not going to sort of believe in anything without that. And so I am very wary of sort of believing in things without any good evidence. So I suppose I'm agnostic, really, about any people having that ability or supernatural ability to perform any kind of magic. What's really called magic in terms of what people do, really is, of course, very clever tricks. And an honest liar will tell you that, most magicians that perform that on a stage as an entertainer, they are like that. They will say, they're not trying to really convince you that it's magic or anything. They're just saying, it's a clever trick. I've gone to great lengths to try and perform it. It often takes a lot of skill, actually, to perform sleight of hand tricks. So, there's a lot of effort and energy that goes into that, and I really admire that. But I think I'm quite wary of people that try to present something that is a clever trick, that can be explained through scientific principles, whether that's through biology, whether that's through physics or psychology. It can be explained, but we don't always have an understanding for it. Who among us is an expert in psychiatry, in psychology, in physics, and in biology, and in all these different fields? I doubt any of us are, really. And so, it's quite possible, to be fooled in different things. So I'd be quite wary about accepting something as actual sort of a magical thing, because it could well be explained through a sort of a scientific principle that I just don't have an understanding of. So I think there are today, especially with the use of technology, you can Photoshop images, you can edit videos to make things look like they're not. It's possible to sort of distort things. You could record someone's voice, couldn't you, and edit it to make it look like they've said things. So there's all sorts of methods through technology that you could employ, couldn't you, to make it appear things are not what they are. But there still could be a very rational explanation, a scientific explanation behind that. Science has actually got many different fields within it. It's a whole realm of different kinds. Within it, science is a very broad study. within that, you've got the social sciences like psychology and sociology, but you've also got more natural sciences like biology, physics, chemistry, astrology. So there's multiple different fields, and so within each one, of course, you can break that down further. There's sort of like there's different fields within psychology, for example. You've got for example, linguistic psychology. The studying of how languages, how people use language, and the effect that has on our brains and on how we relate to each other. So within science, you've got multiple different subjects, and within those, lots of sub-subjects too. So it's a whole giant school of a vast amount of different subjects. So you're never going to expect any individual to be an expert in a whole range of multiple different subjects. No one's an expert in an entire school of so many different subjects. It's just impossible. So yeah, it is quite possible that we can think something looks like it's some sort of magic or something that, wow, we don't understand, how something has happened. But, it's quite possible that there is some credible, rational, scientific explanation. Psychology, of course, is quite a juvenile subject, really, in its infancy in the 20th century. But it's radically changed and evolved over a long time. But compared to older sciences, it's still relatively young. And so, it's our understanding of it is always changing. It's quite organic. I would say that too about linguistics, actually, as well. Although, you could say that our understanding of and our study of languages perhaps goes back further, but in a less academic approach, perhaps. But yeah, I think it's a whole fascinating sort of subject, really, and it's one that I would really encourage people to sort of keep an open mind about, but also caution that they would examine evidence and take sufficient time and energy to look at and consider properly what the evidence is, who's saying it, when, where, how, why, and what it is, and to take sufficient time as well, really, not to rush to any sort of verdicts. So I suppose, yeah, I wanted to say that because it's something I think it's a really, it's a subject that's really not investigated enough, really. I just feel like a lot of people tend to assume that there's no such thing as magic at all. But that, of course, is a meaningless sort of thing to think or say if you don't first properly define what you mean by that term. You can't accept or reject something that you don't understand first. What do you mean by that? I suppose a clear definition, a simple one, would be something that defies the laws of science, right? Of scientific law or understanding. But what is that? That one question, leads to an answer that itself can be questioned, doesn't it? What are scientific laws? What are scientific phenomenon? Yes, we understand some things quite well, and other things we don't understand so well, or there's a dispute about whether we do or don't understand amongst some scientists, at least. So it's an issue that I feel myself from years ago, and there's probably many people still that would assume there's no point looking into it. It's purely science fiction, there's no real supernatural truth to it, though. And that's an assumption I made for years. And I would say it was an assumption. I didn't have any evidence for supernatural phenomenon. I didn't have any evidence against it. I would say for those years, I don't look down on people that think that because I just hadn't spent enough time investigating it. To be quite honest with you, I was so concerned with other issues in my life. I was busy working and studying and socializing, doing other things, that it didn't seem that important, and it also seemed not something worthwhile. I enjoyed it in a science fiction setting, but I very much sort of thought magic as something that was only a science fiction. I assumed there was no reality to it, so it's not worth investigating it. But I think that was an assumption, really. But, people must, I suppose, come to their own conclusions and that. But then I think, as well as people that are purely scientific and atheistic, I think there perhaps are other people who are open to the idea of there being supernatural kinds of magic. But then I suppose maybe too accepting about everything. Just because there maybe are some supernatural things we can't explain doesn't mean that any claim can be accepted and everything can be, So we need to be careful about, how we accept or reject anything. I would say your life experiences are your evidence. My life experiences are my evidence. Like I've explained, for me, the evidence that there is some sort of supernatural force or presence or whatever you want to call it is because I've experienced so many things that are just beyond coincidence and beyond any sort of rational explanation. Now that's me in my own life. Whether people choose to say, well, that you've chosen to sort of look for things, to confirm your own beliefs, I would say I haven't, and actually those things are just so incredible, like Carl Jung and countless other people have found. And it's not just me, it's what millions of others find too, actually, and I'm reassured to find that out, actually. And I would have thought once, I would have assumed that what I feel now is mad and irrational and ridiculous, and I did think that of millions of other people, and I would have thought, so what if millions of people think that, that millions of people think other things, it doesn't matter how many people think that, but it's reassuring, I suppose, to know that lots of people think lots of different things. So even when you sort of come to believe in something that you realise could appear irrational, and does to many others, but there are other people that sort of have at least come to the same kind of view as you. They've experienced similar, albeit different things. Trying to assess what your life experiences are is a hard one, actually. And I